An interview with Michael Fless and John Marcus, friends for a long time. 2025, Arcata, California. Hey, you know what time it is? There's a clock right behind John's head. It says 10:30. And this is June 3rd, 2025. And I'm sitting here with John Marcus and Michael Fless. And I'm here doing an interview in the trailer in Arcata, California, with these two guys that have known each other for a long time. I have a couple questions to ask them. But the first thing I wanted to ask you was, how long have you known each other?
Mental math. Well, let's see. I think I was probably about 11 when I knew your family in the San Fernando Valley. But maybe. The first time, the first time I actually remember having a talk with you, you came to visit my parents over on Camellia Avenue in North Hollywood.
What avenue was it?
Camellia Avenue.
Okay, yeah, good.
And I had just started junior high, maybe. Well, let's call it junior high.
Okay.
That was 7th grade. So at that point, I was kind of uneasy about the adjustment between going from elementary school to 7th grade, and you know how they did things differently there. And you talked about how neat it was to, like, for instance, be able to take gym first period so you'd for sure get a shower in. That's, you were very earnest and trying to be very encouraging. So I appreciated that. So that must have been, you start 7th grade at 12 years old. Let's just say 1960.
1960.
1960. So personally having met you for the first time in person, I'd heard your mom talk about you, about picking you up at school and you having a fever and all of that. That was earlier before you actually came home.
What was this thing about the summer of 42?
Well, that's Michael's connection to my family and I guess Marcus. So my mom had this, archetypal brother who became the archetypal uncle, providing all kinds of adventure and wild ideas to the nephews. My father was a little more straightforward and conventional, although a very creative person, also a wonderful sense of humor. But anyway, Ray had a very interesting life. As a drifter, a traveler, an explorer of many areas, deep interest in ideas, very inspiring. And he met Michael's mother, Pearl Fless, at an Air Force base in New Jersey in the summer of 1942.
Okay, that's where that link is.
Yes.
This was single women who volunteered to dance with the people in the military, so they would have some kind of social life.
Mm-hmm. And then didn't you have some projects later on in your lives together, teaching music or working with children?
Absolutely.
So can we talk about that?
Now we flash forward 10 years from 1960, it's around 1970. I had gone off to Berkeley, California at the tender age of 17. I think I wasn't quite ready for it all. And I'd kind of fallen adrift in the tumultuous life of that time. And I think I sort of dropped out of school finally because it just got to be too much for me. And someone, I don't know if it was someone in the family, but Michael had just, the next time I met Michael actually was before that. I had traveled to New York with a friend of mine. We were street musicians.
Oh yeah.
And they gave me Michael's address. He was then living with Christopher Tree in a very tiny apartment in the East Village, I guess you'd call it. And, you know, I got in touch with them, and that's where I met Michael and Christopher. It seemed it was a kind of a religious experience. They seemed like deeply spiritual people. They offered me a little food, which I thought was so generous, and we played music, and it was very, very nice. And that's where we kind of met again, both having developed this deep interest in music. So that was the start of some
I just want to say,
kind of thing.
to use the word apartment is pretty loose. What it was a dark room for developing still photographs. And we were allowed to sleep on the floor in that room.
Wow. So it was still being used as a photography room?
They would take, I remember they would take the pieces of paper, dip them in some liquid, and then hang them up with
Right.
clothespins.
But that room was still being used for that, besides you sleeping in it.
Oh yeah, it was still being used for that. we were fortunate to have a private place to lie down.
Right. And so that relationship carried on into some kind of project, working with other people, traveling around at.
Well, it was there in that apartment that, you know, this association between Michael and Christopher went through a transformation. And I remember the last time I visited, they all had these beatific, is that the word they say it, smiles on their faces. And they said, you know, Michael was going off on a new adventure, moving to New Mexico. And, you know, there was no bitterness, it was just this wonderful feeling of love, you know. And so indeed, Michael began his New Mexico adventure. And again, okay, so I was in Berkeley, I was kind of just living in this room, kind of bored Berkeley, Oakland, no real direction in life. And somehow somebody got the idea that I should go visit Michael in New Mexico. Somebody in my family, you know, I don't know if they knew what I was getting into, but I went to visit Michael in New Mexico. You know, it was quite an experience.
And where was I in New Mexico?
In Chamizal.
In New Mexico.
In New Mexico, yes, up in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, close to the village of Truchas, where all the penitentes live.
Oh yeah.
Right? And he had this, you know, lovely little cabin up there that was, you know, needed a few repairs. I remember kind of giving a helping hand as they were replacing a window, and that was with Latima. So he had invited me to stay with him, even though they were, you know, Latima was getting ready to have the child, and we all got to know and love Ian. And yeah, it was.
So what they would do during the Easter, they had these big crosses that were actually made from trees. They were heavy, and they would put them, they were so heavy all they could do is put the cross part over their shoulders, and they would walk through. It was a parade actually, and then they would whip themselves as they were walking through, and they were trying to identify with Christ, who suffered all of this, and they now were suffering it and putting themselves in the same position.
Over and over and over.
And, you know, just to be honest, and I hope I'm not saying anything that's too personal, but the impression I got from Michael at that point is that he was trying to identify with Christ. And which was, you know, very different. I'm a Jewish kid, and, you know, I wasn't particularly Christian and all that, but it was kind of interesting in a whole other perspective, so I will say. that just opened me up to all kinds of other perspectives.
Right. And then you kept playing music together?
Well, that's where I started, you know. I remember just sitting in there, you had a whole bunch of instruments, and, you know, I was kind of allowed to just play on them as much as I liked to. Must have been a great deal of tolerance on his part and Latifah's part, but I just thought, gee, I could just do this for my whole life.
And then you began doing that.
Watch what you wish for, right?
Yeah, then you began doing it for your whole life.
Anyway, deep experiences. Yeah, some very deep experience. Oh, there was that dog, Bianca, which I thought was a very cool name for a dog. And there were cows. We'd have breakfast outside, and Michael had this comic way of chasing away the cows. So, yeah, it was wonderful. And what I do remember is sleeping very deeply, more deeply than I had ever slept.
Yeah. New Mexico is like that. The land of enchantment, as it's called on the license plates. Did you do some kind of projects? Maybe I'm getting this confused with somebody else, but did you do some kind of projects working in the asylums?
Yeah.
The asylum.
With John?
There is
Yeah.
asylum. Well, what I remember is I do remember working in the local elementary school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And going there, it was kind of turning into fall, crisp fall morning, going to this little elementary school with all these instruments, and you know, kind of what we did last night.
Mm-hmm.
We just did it with the kids.
With like gongs and flutes.
Well,
and
I don't
drums
think
and
it was quite that. There might have been one gong. I don't know.
Oh, they were definitely gongs. Yeah.
flutes and shakers and
Yeah, the whole
drums,
thing.
yeah.
And you know, Michael wrote me, hey, I'm playing music with deaf people and with
Yeah,
kids
that's
with
right.
disabilities, and I'm like, you know, it kind of doesn't sound too interesting, but you know, because of the joyousness of the way you did that sort of thing, you began to see these people in a totally different way. So that was also wonderful and very enriching.
I just want to point out of a class of 30, we would only have 4 or 5 up with us playing music. And the other kids would be the audience.
Right.
And then we do, in my mind, 2 songs. And then those kids would go back and join the audience, and another 4 or 5 would come up and join us. That was the usual routine.
And how many were in your group, your music group?
Oh,
Was Latin
3 or 4 or 5, something like
And then
that.
you talked
Well,
about
this is in New Mexico. So, anyway, you know, however the details of that were, then I, you know, after a month or so, I went back to Berkeley or whatever. Time went by. Next thing I know, Michael is starting this project in Vancouver. It's called the Children's Spontaneous Music Workshop, and he got this wonderful grant from the Canadian government.
That's right.
So he was able to actually hire people, a lot of wonderful young creative people, social worker, somebody who had actually done music therapy in Louisiana, Carolyn McKenny. Yeah. Several folks. Anyway, yeah, there were 2 teams of
Wow.
The country group and the city group.
and there was Clark Abbott,
Oh,
very
that's right.
famous adventurer.
And how was that all organized? Was this like, okay, today you guys are gonna go here, and
Say a little.
how was it organized? Like your format of how you did all the teaching and all the planning and getting there?
It was very simple because the normal thing was we would go into a class of, I don't know, 25 kids, you know, and the instruments would be set up when they would walk into the class. And then we would play for just 10 or 15 minutes for them, just to show them, how could you say, to treat the instruments gently, which mallets to use for which gongs and stuff like that. And then they would come up, as I say, 4 or 5 at a time, and play for 15 minutes. In my mind, we do 2 songs,
Yeah.
and then another group would come up until we had finished. Everybody in the class had a turn.
But what about the aspect of like, what schools? Where are you gonna go? Who's gonna go today?
Oh, I would go to the school. I would simply go to the principals and tell them, here is a program that is already paid for by the Canadian government. And so if you would like to have our program, just tell us when we could come.
Right.
So
And how long did this program go on for?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
You mean you kept getting refunded?
Oh man, I mean, the Canadian government is everything the United States should be. We were invited to an alternative music conference on Vancouver Island. And I called up the head people in Toronto,
Ottawa.
and where?
Ottawa.
Ottawa, yeah.
Sorry.
And I told them we wanted to go to this conference, but we didn't have the money to go. There was 10 of us, 2 groups, 5 each. And they said, well, how much do you want? And I said, oh, we could stay with friends. No, we don't want you to stay with friends. We want you to stay at hotels. So I said, $1,000. Now, in those days, that meant like $5,000
Yeah.
today.
Right.
And the guy just said on the phone, okay, the money's there, you know. And so it seemed like 2 or 3 hours after he told me that, the postman was coming up my steps, knocking on the door. We have a money order for you, you know, and it was just...
Nice. And then after all that event happened, after the 2 years, kind of like what happened with the whole motion of momentum of that program?
What happened?
What was to happen to the momentum of the program? Like why after 2 years did it just not happen anymore?
So
I'll let you answer that.
it was personal, I think, in the sense that, you know, my son was, I don't know, 4 or 5 or something like this, and in my usual romantic way of thinking about things, I wanted to get out of Canada. It was too much like the United States. And I was in a passageway in between 2 things we were doing. It was a kind of a garden thing. And this guy said, what are you doing? And I just explained like I did to you just now.
Right.
He looked me in the eyes and he said, San Cristobal de las Casas, Chiapas. And no explanation, no nothing. When I get back to the group, they said, where are we going? San Cristobal de las Casas, Chiapas. And lo and behold, I just went down there and we rented a mansion for $35 a month. And we started working with, how could you say?
Mainly you go out to the indigenous communities.
That's right. We were going up into the indigenous communities every day by car. And so when I say indigenous communities, these people had barely seen white people ever in their lives, you know. And we come in our car, and on Sundays during market day, and we would just spread a blanket out, put our instruments on the blanket, and at first they thought we were selling these instruments because everybody else was selling. Then we said, no, we have to keep the instruments so different people can have a chance to play them. First, the white kids whose fathers and mothers ran these stores who were ripping off the Indians. They would sell all this soap and all this normal stuff at usually high prices there. Their kids always were the kings and queens, so they came and played with us first. So they got tired of it. And then slowly the Indian kids came up 4 or 5 at a time and played with us. It took them a little while to see that it was okay to play. Now, I should have mentioned, I had a business at the time buying musical instruments that these people were making, in particular harps and violins and guitars. But the harps were amazing. They were full size that you could put on your shoulder and play like this. All the strings were piano strings, 3 different kinds of piano string. But all the wooden part they made themselves. They were so cheap that I was selling them, I think, for $12 a piece. Even in those days, that was pretty cheap for a big major instrument like that.
And the whole group went there. Was you and John and who else?
One girl, Lisa, who was an adolescent girl,
Lisa,
who lives here, Dorothy and Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, did Lisa come with us to play? I can't remember.
She did, but she was just an adolescent, and she actually was in the same position that the Indian kids were. She was just another kid. If she can play, okay, then it must be okay for us to play. You know?
And then there were other people who'd come with us sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I just don't.
Oh, it wasn't consistently the same
I don't
people.
know when. I don't think Carvin really ever came with us out to those things.
I can't remember.
And how long did that go on for? Doing that, being in Chiapas.
Being in Chiapas?
Yeah.
4 years?
Huh?
About 4 years.
Was it? Okay.
3 or 4 years.
Wow.
I mean, yeah. Oh, we did play at the little Institute of Bellas Artes for the kids in San Cristobal. We did that several times. And we had this relationship with the publisher of the newspaper. I forget his name. Figueroa, is that his name?
Could be.
Armando, and he kind of thought we were amusing. He thought we were amusing, and
Yeah, we played for the governor's birthday in this real wild place above. It was something like Grand Canyon. We were in this cave kind of thing, and then there was a river running down by it, and it was a surprise for the governor. And he was the governor of this whole state of Chiapas, and it was really quite something.
And this was like 1971.
Yeah, but to go back to the question about Vancouver, what's interesting is, not one group of people who had been doing it under the grant program figured out a way to continue to do it, and they wound up starting a whole musical therapy program at one of the community colleges there, and it was really one of the first music therapy programs in Canada, and 40 years later they were still going and become a big program, and their 40th anniversary celebration we went to, and Michael didn't make it, but Christopher came to that.
Right, I remember when that happened.
Really interesting, but it did. This whole opportunity for youth program did lead to the establishment of a whole music therapy program, and the core of it was still the spontaneous music.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's one aspect of it. I think
that's amazing. That's super.
Yeah.
Because it is still a viable resource for change.
Yeah, I mean, later
music
I did
always has been.
Take classes in music therapy on the college level.
So one of my final questions before this kind of winds up is, what was your influence to do this music therapy with kids? What was the influence of doing musical therapy with kids and adults? And what was the influence of that? I know Christopher Tree was, but beyond that or before that.
You see, he was such an advanced musician that he simply played for them as a concert. And it definitely, but my attitude was, I'm not a musician on that scale, so why not invite the children to come up and play with me, and they get something out of it, out of actually doing it themselves.
Okay, so this was like a self-created concept.
Yeah. Like you would in a regular classroom, if somebody had a particular talent, a kid, you could bring them up and share their talent with the whole rest of the class. You know?
Now, one of the people that I know of that did that was Ella Jenkins.
Was who?
Ella Jenkins.
Ella Jenkins.
She was an African-American woman from the United States that taught kids songs, clapping songs and old, you know, and she put out records and was really treated the kids with respect and like calmness and
I mean, what was interesting is, I mean, we not only played in Vancouver, we not only played for regular elementary classes, I don't think we did higher level, but we did play, for instance, at a halfway house for kids who were, you know, had some mental disability. And these were some of the most powerful sessions, and among those kids were kids who did have musical talent. And it was quite...
So we took the best of those kids we had worked with, and we made what you might call a super group, and we toured with those kids, and the kids in the audience say, hey, those guys are just like me, or I knew them from this school. So they could be released to, how could you say, play with us as well.
right, they became part of the school community. Well, this has been a great interview. And John, what are you doing now?
What am I doing now? Well,
What have you been doing for years?
what have I been doing with the rest of my life? Well, at a certain point, you know, during my travels and all of this, it just seemed like it was time to come home, back to the United States, and to get I would say, solid source of income for myself and my family. So I did become a school teacher and finished my degrees in college and became a elementary school teacher, and I worked in that system for about 25 years. And so then I was able to retire and wound up moving to Flagstaff, Arizona, and I worked in some schools there, and then fully retired from that sort of work, and been teaching music lessons ever since. Part of the music school, which I'm now part owner of.
Okay, yeah, it was music school. What is that called?
Flagstaff School of Music.
There you go, Flagstaff School of Music.
What's wonderful is through the community connections there, there's a lot of creativity in Flagstaff, being a university town, having a famous observatory, that sort of thing. So there's a high level of creativity, and I've met some people who have supported me and Carmen, my wife, who also worked with Michael in Mexico and France. We've been doing our late show presentation and some, sound healing presentations in Flagstaff since then.
Oh, so you also lived in France
Yeah.
in the building of that. See, that's what else I wanted to talk about. So maybe that could be our next little interview.
Yes.
And Michael, what are you doing right now?
Well, the first thing I would say is I am retired, so I am definitely not doing any shows of any kind. I'm at home playing music, and some of us have a studio here, and we go there maybe once a week whenever we can and play music together, and buying or trading for new instruments as they come up, and that's basically it.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you guys are together to be able to do this. And this is Sean Powers with Michael and John. And thank you so much. SeanShadows.com. This is Sean again with Michael and John. And Michael had a lot of experiences with in the jazz scene in the days in New York. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about them because they're very interesting stories. Tell me your experience with John Coltrane.
Okay, so I lived on the Lower East Side and I worked in the Village. And in between those two was a kind of a bar restaurant where Coltrane played in the evenings with his group. But he was virtually unknown. I think he had just come from the West Coast and he wasn't so well known out there yet. And when the owner of that place found out that they didn't have any place to rehearse because the neighbors in the apartment house, how could you say, complained about the loudness of the music. So the guy said, hey man, the restaurant is open and free all day. You guys can come in here and practice as much as you want. And then, play your regular shows at night. So I would drop in there while they were doing their rehearsals. And to tell you the truth, although the music was great, I did enjoy eavesdropping on their conversations together, especially arranging things. Oh, that saxophone part that you play, you're playing way too loud and the people can't hear. Okay, good, we'll back off on that. And listen, on the drums now we need more cymbals, la da da la. And me, I was just like listening to all of this and thinking, so this is how these guys get it all together. So, it looks casual, but behind the scenes,
They're fine-tuning the music. They're fine-tuning the music with their ears and their words.
And the human relationships that people have together. Now I'm seeing a lot of live music around here, and the thing that I'm always looking for is who is the leader of this band? You can't tell normally. And then all of a sudden, he'll, with his back to the audience, he'll point to this, shake his head, okay, that's the guy. The guy who's playing bass has organized the whole thing musically,
Right.
My only little disappointment as a disciple of Christopher's is they always are using written music.
Yeah.
Oh, what page is it? Oh, and sometimes there'll be like 50 people in the audience and everything stops because they can't find the page of music that they're supposed to be playing. Oh, they rustle off oh, wait a minute, here's one. Everybody sits down, smile. Please excuse us, then they do their beats,
Such great importance laid upon the written word, the written on piece of paper. Oh, I gotta find that piece of paper with those notations on it.
I mean, as somebody who does a little bit of that myself now, sometimes there's very complex chord changes, and you kind of want to know what they are.
Right.
It really does help.
Yeah.
And you can kind of navigate your improvisation that way, and keep the group together. So
Right.
There's a lot
it's
of
like having some base to branch out in.
There's a lot of body language in that, though. For me, the leader, I can always say, she'll nod at the piano player. Okay, now it's your turn. Don't play the bass right now because, whatever it is.
There's little hand gestures that they did.
Yeah, that's right.
And the Sun Ra used to just stand there and he would control the audience with his eyes. His body would be totally still with his back turned towards the audience, and all the band players are watching him, and he's not doing anything that you can physically see except he's moving his mouth and his eyes and telling the players what to do. Now, I just read a quote about I saw some notes that Thelonious Monk would give his musicians, and there'd be little things that he'd point out, and one of them was, don't play all those squeaky notes, just play the harmony. And so that leads to another question: is like, what is your connection with Thelonious Monk, Michael?
My person, yeah. So I had a very wealthy girlfriend in New York. She hired him for $1,000 to play music for a party that she was throwing, and there were lots of lovely people there, and they were all dancing like you do at a party. It was a big, clear room, and he was in a kind of a separate section. It was part of the bigger room. There was a kind of a little alcove where he was playing, and nobody knew who he was. They were just dancing like they would dance at any other dance. And me, I was like a jazz aficionado. My tongue was hanging out. And then he saw me standing there like that, just sort of gazing at him like a dope.
Yeah.
And he patted the piano chair next to him. Those chairs are big enough for two people.
Yeah.
And so I came and I couldn't believe it, but I came and sat, and he played and everything. And yeah, I think in those days he was a little bit had other kind of problems with his arm, so to speak. But nonetheless, I mean, he did his job as a musician, and I was very honored to be sitting there next to him, and it was very kind of him to let me do it.
That's amazing. That's funny. Now I remember a third and last person I'm going to ask about, and I know there was kind of like a really brief encounter that you had with someone that everybody knows. His name was Bob Dylan.
Oh.
Tell me that little short story that you told me.
I don't remember exactly what story I told you. I just remember meeting him in New York very early on in the Village, and he was playing at one of the clubs in town, but he wasn't well known or anything. We just knew each other because in a certain sense we were part of the music scene. I think I was playing music already by that time.
I think what you told me was someone came up to you and said, "Hey Michael, this is Bob Dylan. He's going to be really big," and you just kind of shrugged your shoulder like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?"
Yeah, because when I said, "Oh, look, there's 1,000 guys down here in the Village that are going to be, everybody says are going to be big someday," but I don't think my response was wrong. But I think maybe in retrospect, the other people could see, oh, he was da-da-da-da-da-da, and he didn't even know it. But nobody knew it because he hadn't done it yet.
Right. No, I think that's just kind of funny. Random people that you meet. Just like, Jack Kerouac wrote stories about people, just like everyday people that he was just hanging out with.
Who?
Jack Kerouac, or any of those people that were writing, they were just writing about everyday people that probably no one would have even noticed, but they just happened to know how to write about them in a way that was captivating and captured their spirit. And that's what music does, like improvised music. They might take a song that is well known by everybody, but they improvise on it. They make it something more than what it was. They added to it. And so like Jack Kerouac wrote about common everyday people that he just remembered in a certain way and wrote it down. And I just find that really interesting.
Well, in Kerouac's case, in my experience, he wasn't really comfortable unless he'd been drinking quite a bit. And our magazine had been suppressed at the University of Chicago. And we decided to leave the university rather than, how could you say, edit our magazine for the administration.
Mm-hmm.
And so we became heroes of the literary people. And when we arrived in New York, this was for publishing William Burroughs, who I'm not a fan of. He's a good writer, but I'm not a fan of his, or even personally didn't get along with him very well. But at the train station, there was quite a few people there to meet us when we arrived with the manuscript, and among them was Kerouac. And we went to Chinatown, and I don't know if you guys know about this, but if there's enough people, they give you a room all by yourself. There's nobody else there, but the table is like maybe could seat 30 people. We had a kind of a semicircle table like this, and we were just in there by ourselves having a good time, been drinking quite a bit. And then to celebrate, bless his heart, Jack got up on the table and tap danced to Chicago and sang Chicago, Chicago, that wonderful town. Of course, I mean, all the cups and saucers that were jiggling around on the table and getting broken and blah, 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 like that. But the little bit of time I spent with him, he was, you might call, normally socially uncomfortable. Or that was my impression, you know.
Sounds familiar.
Yep. Sure does.
A lot of creative people
Can I
are like
circle
that.
back to something really quick?
Yes.
I know we have time limits. So you mentioned Sun Ra, and in Flagstaff, there's been this annual celebration of what we call the Sun Ra Earthly Arrival Party.
Nice.
And I've been able to participate in the last few of those. And, you know, we work with some charts, I think some of them are original, and there is like more space for free improvisation than in most jazz charts. And, you know, it's not so strictly this round robin thing, like someone's taking a solo and you just don't get in the way, you know,
Yeah.
at all. There's an encouragement for, you know, just layers of different melodies working together. And it gets really cool, you know, when you're doing that. You just start playing off each other and creating kind of like we were doing last night, you know, just creating something very spontaneously.
And they
The audience.
merge. Those notes merge, and all of a sudden there's another sound that comes out.
Yes, yes.
I don't know if you ever heard field recordings of African, all over Africa. There's these horn bands, but they're not using metal horns, they're using bamboo horns with reeds in them. And they've turned them into this amazing music. And if you ever get to hear that, you understand where Sun Ra is coming from. Because Sun Ra was coming from outer space, but also coming from Africa. And Africa was coming from outer space.
What was the Doge tribe? Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Dogon.
in a more literal sense,
Yeah.
I had a phone conversation with Sun Ra, telling him we were playing da 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 da. How could you say dedicated to him this
Nice.
particular session? And he said, "That's great. My plane is passing overhead at exactly that time, and I'm going to send good wishes down to you for your show." So I
That's
said,
great.
"Jesus, that's really nice, you know."
Yeah.
And I told everybody, okay, his plane is coming overhead now. Hit it.
Perfect. I actually got to see Sun Ra play twice, and it changed my life because
Oh gosh.
it was, I just didn't know what to think about it. I was like, wow, this is a new, I realized about music was way beyond what I thought music was. And such a powerful force.
I had the same experience with Ornette Coleman. And I was in New York. I had this girlfriend that I was really head over heels in love with coming out to visit me. I had a side table right on this little nightclub thing, but I had a terrible bias. I thought nobody's going to come next to Charlie Parker, but I'm just going to be a nice guy, and this is the only big show in town, and I'll come and bring her to this to show her I know how to hit the high spots, etc., you know, like that. And I ended up weeping on my hands like this, hearing Ornette, because he was reaching for another language. And like me, he was just coming from LA. He had been successful in LA, and now he was trying to, this was his first night in New York, you know, doing a show. And he just, and his guys that he was working with, they were just so, I don't know if you ever noticed this, I've just seen it recently all the time, when these musician groups play together, and they've been playing together for a long time, one guy will do some amazing thing on the bass, and they'll all just be, their jaws will drop. They've never heard anything like that, and they'll smile at this guy like, okay, now you made it worthwhile for me going through all this bullshit, being on stage and playing these same old tunes because you took off into something else.
That's like Miles Davis said that he can do a whole show, 3-hour show, and there'll be like 5 seconds of that he thought was worth it. And it was just like something that he worked for 3 hours to get that 5 seconds. And that's all it really is enlightenment only takes 1 second, half a second, a millisecond. It doesn't take much to change a whole person's whole life, a whole person's whole life.
You know, I think there's a way of refining that whole process, so maybe you get a little bit more, and you get even deeper.
Get more and more.
And you get someplace you never expected to get.
Yeah. And talking about places getting to get, what?
I gotta tell my Miles Davis story now. We went to hear him, my girlfriend and I, in a club in New York. And it was a great show, and we were just walking almost out the door. And she said, oh, hold on a minute, hon. I got to say goodnight to Miles. I didn't even know she knew him, you know. So she goes, and she was a very good-looking lady, and she went up and this and that and the other thing. And she said, oh, yeah, by the way, I'd like to introduce my friend John. And so I was standing here. He just put his hand on the back of his shoulder like this to shake hands. I was back here to shake hands like with him like that. So I said, okay, good. Still, I got to touch his hand.
You got the blessing.
Yeah, I got a chance to see Miles Davis too, and that was, again, another life-changing experience in that I didn't know what to expect, and it was so powerful. And I did see that 1 second, and I felt it in the air, and I saw it in the sky. That 1 second that he talks about, that one beautiful moment for him, Miles Davis. And again, this has been Sean with John and Michael. And again, thank you for the memories, and I'll talk to you guys soon again, okay?
That was the theme song of Bob Hope in the old days. Thanks for the memories. From the 20s. At vaudeville. You know, we don't know how much we've been influenced by vaudeville. You know, all these tight little, they do 6 little tiny shows of an evening. Magic shows and singing and tap dancing.
Talent.
Maybe it's time for a revival.
That was the term break a leg came from the vaudeville days, because if you made it to the edge of the stage and the leg was the curtain that separated the stage from the participants, then you broke the leg. You got on stage. So break a leg. Leg. Thanks, John and Michael, for your interview. Thanks again.